All right, everybody, welcome back to Vicky 3 Academy. I'm Walker, and here we are discussing in this how to defeat a powerful landowner. So, there's a large class of countries in Victoria 3 that are going to start with powerful landowners of one type or another. The Ottoman Empire, Austria, Russia, all three of these start with a very powerful landowner. Prussia is also going to start with a fairly powerful landowner, and they all have very different power structures on the one hand, while also probably having similar power structures in another way. So, if you have a powerful landowner, how should you approach it? Well, it does depend, and it depends on how your landowner is powerful. And that you can check by just setting up in your outliner over here your interest groups, and then just mousing over your clout for your landowner. This is your dude right here. Mouse over this, and it'll tell you very clearly where your political strength is coming from. For every country, you have this base from wealth modifier that kind of is always true. How the wealth is distributed in your country, therefore, has a big impact on how power is distributed in your country, right? Because they get political power from their wealth. They do get a small amount of political power per politically active pop as well, and that's going to come out of their average wealth, and so having some numbers behind you is pretty helpful. But the most important thing when it comes to where their political strength is going to be coming from is going to be this wealth base modifier plus laws and characters and stuff. So anytime you open up one of these countries that has a powerful landowner, be prepared to find just a bunch of really stupid laws that do bad stuff for you, and most of the things that they all do, in addition to being bad, is power up the landowner. And so what you're going to need to do in order to defeat a landowner is identify where their power is coming from. In this case, in every case, there's going to be wealth. And let's go through it in order, right? If you want to defeat a landowner by combating their wealth, one of the first and easiest tools that almost every single powerful landowner country starts with is a gigantic pool of authority. And you can use that gigantic pool of authority to just beat the crap out of your landowner. Make sure that you are using these consumption taxes as punitively as possible. And if you're not sure how to do that, then go in here, go into their population. It looks like the majority of their pops and their standard of living are aristocrats. And let's just see what the average aristocrat is buying, right? Net income, we've got their needs over here. They've got their luxury items. God, this is just ridiculous. We can do it this way. So services, they're buying services, furniture, clothes, grain, luxury clothes, porcelain, luxury furniture, tea. So yeah, just tax all the luxury things, because the furniture and clothes and grain and stuff your poor pops will also be buying. But all of those luxury things, that's a rich person only thing. If you need some money, you can tax tobacco and stuff like that. But I would primarily be focusing on trying to utilize your consumption taxes, not necessarily to increase the size of your budget. That's what you can increase taxes for, but to just increase the pain on your political opponents, because attacking their wealth will attack their power. There's another way to kind of like do it two-edged sword, or something like that, where you can not only take away the wealth of the local governors, but also increase the wealth of your bureaucrats. Because remember that this wealth, relatively speaking, it's going to be balanced out against the wealth of everybody else. And so if you can give a bunch of wealth to a different part of your society, like the military or your bureaucrats, while also taxing the crap out of your aristocrats, you can seriously punish the from wealth side of it, right? So that's the first part that you can do in order to combat the political strength of a landowner, is get rid of their money. The other thing you can do that's always available is to get rid of their pops. So keep in mind, what do we have here? We have local governors. They're supported by aristocrats, clergymen, and farmers. Boy, that sounds really familiar. We've got clergymen, peasants, and aristocrats. And so if you want to get rid of local governors, then one thing that you can do is, of course, to kick the local governors out of government and then suppress them. But you can also bolster the other IGs that have similar pop types, right? Like instead of doing all of these like really low value taxes, I could do a bolster here and a bolster here and a suppression here. And that's going to allow me to immediately start pushing the population away from the landowner. And as the pops are pushed away from the landowner and towards these other guys, they're going to take their wealth with them, which means that this is like suppression and whatnot is doing double duty here. But there's another factor on top of the suppression and bolstering that we're not really going to be able to see in the Ottoman Empire, but we do see really clearly in Japan, which is popularity. The popularity for the leader for the devout in Japan starts with 125 popularity. This dude drains pops from the shogunate like no tomorrow. And so what I'm trying to tell you here is be aware that defeating the shogunate does not just mean attacking the shogunate's wealth. It means also attacking the shogunate's base of support, which can involve just encouraging them to leave for another IG. All right, so beyond those tools, you have, of course, these leaders here, like the generals and whatnot. You can use generals and admirals to severely change the political makeup in your country, because these guys, they give boosts to the party that they're associated with. Does anybody start? No, not you guys. Don't start with anyone useful. Do you start with anyone useful? A rural folk, sure. So if we were to recruit this rural folk admiral and then promote him a bunch of times, he would absorb a little bit of bureaucracy, so this action is not free, but it is going to create interest group political strength. You see that? And so one of the things that you can do to drown out the political strength of the local governors, because they do this to you. Don't think that this is cheesing it, because they do this to you. Look how many of these local governor characters there are at the beginning of the game in most of these powerful local governor countries, right? Local governor, or landowner. I mean, like, almost all your leaders are landowners as Russia. So, like, don't pretend like you're cheating by employing a bunch of field marshals and stuff, because they started it. They started doing this. But then there is one final and absolutely critical aspect to this that we haven't even addressed yet. Actually, there are two. There's changing the nature of your economy, which I suppose we could, let's have a very brief conversation about industrialization. We will have a how to industrialize your economy. But basically, in order to industrialize your economy and to move past landowners, devout, and rural folk, which are the symbols of pre-industrial society, just don't build a lot of buildings that employ the pop types that are typically associated with those. So don't build a lot of things that employ a lot of aristocrats and clergymen, and give peasants jobs. So build a bunch of urban buildings. I mean, like, if you want to reduce the strength of a landowner, it should make sense that you should not be building tobacco plantations, because that'll give them money. But if you build furniture manufactories and those give a bunch of money to the industrialists, that'll be great, because not only does it give money to the industrialists, but it's going to be giving like these different kinds of jobs to different people, and that in turn will also increase the number of pops associated with those IGs. So just like, don't be afraid to use your industry to fight them too. But be aware that if you're trying to reduce their wealth, you kind of can't do it as easily here. You can modify their wealth if you build an awful lot of like dye or whatever, and then you use them in your textile mills. If you're massively overproducing your dye, then you are going to kind of hamper the strength of the landowner. But don't get too caught up in that. Like, mostly if you're trying to use construction points to remove them, it's because you're removing subsistence farms by just building industry. But there is this law part. The law part is the usually the really big part when it comes to defeating a powerful landowner. So different powerful landowners are actually different in different countries. Sometimes they have a set ideology and sometimes they do not. So that is going to have an outsized impact on the strategies that you can employ if you're fighting a powerful landowner. As Japan, for instance, you can have your leader roll as a pacifist or a jingoist, in which case they will be in favor of changing the peasant levies model. But basically what you need to do if you are fighting a powerful landowner in regards to your laws is you need to find a way to make the landowners happy without necessarily making them strong. So that way you can take the actions that will make them weaker and also make them angry. And so one of the things that you can do is that reroll to get jingoist. But if you start with serfdom abolished, it doesn't matter if you have slave trade or not. If you start with serfdom abolished, then there exists a journal entry that you can use to consistently get a way to use landowners kind of against themselves, which would be the corn laws. So in order to get the corn laws to go, we would need the landowners in government. So we would elect to do this prior to removing the local governors. We can still be draining them this way. They won't be draining them quite as effectively, but we'll have these powerful landowners in government. And then the corn laws will allow us to do export prioritized tariffs on grain. That's what we need to do. So we'll go in here, export prioritized. And now we're going to get a journal entry. And that journal entry, corn laws, I'm not gonna play through to it, but that is going to allow us to consistently, although not reliably in terms of date, consistently in terms of outcome, get a character here with the free trade ideology, which means that you can consistently get a way to switch into laissez-faire with the support of the local governors, which is a huge bonus for you because it means that they'll be much happier, and then you can go around and do stuff like remove hereditary bureaucrats. If you can find a way to have pacifists or jingoists, then you can remove peasant levies by switching into the preferred military method there. But that can be RNG related. Corn laws, if you have as long as you do not have serfdom, then you can do it. If you have serfdom, unfortunately, laissez-faire does require no serfdom. So that is a barrier there. But yeah, you're basically just going to try to get to somewhere where you make the landowners happy by giving them something that they think that they want, like no police, for instance, going in a dedicated police force. That's going to get you a +5 with the local landowners, but doesn't make them any stronger. You do enough of those things, and then you can go in there and do slavery banned without starting a civil war. If you want to just go for a civil war, you can. That's another very viable option. I hear a lot of strong things out of doing just civil war as Japan, where you delete all of the barracks outside of your capital, and then just they capitulate immediately to you. But if you don't want to cheese it that way, there are some really fun and interesting things that you can do to reduce landowner power. And the last thing that I think we'll talk about in regards to laws is that not only are there ways to have these percentages changed, right? Because you see that there's like percentages out of slave trade, but the introduction of democracy directly combats a landowner, which most people do not realize because they don't think about the way votes work. But remember, in an autocratic society, all of the political strength of the the interest group is going to be primarily coming from their wealth, and then a little bit based off of the size of the population. But that's not true in a democratic society. In a democratic, that's not true in a democratic society, or a mostly democratic society. There will be some votes going to the landowners, 1.05 million. But there's also votes going to the industrialists. There's votes going to the intelligentsia. And so what this means is we've added all of these new political strength metrics into the balance between wealth and wealth per pop in a way that's shifted the balance of power more towards pops. The more pops you have when you have more the more pops you have when you're more democratic, the more votes you're going to be getting. And so if you want to reduce the strength of a powerful landowner, you could go universal suffrage. Let's do fast enact. There we go. And now with universal suffrage in place, we will see most likely less political strength in our next election. Let's just see, because it is going to be dependent on that political strength of votes in an election, because it resets for every single election, which is frustrating for the purposes of the video, but interesting for the purposes of assessing the strength of the landowners. But yeah, they're just disintegrating. All right, the party will never end. We are not gonna do that. Unfortunately, this means we can't really like hold them steady. But you'll see that their average wealth kind of has gone down, and it's primarily because it looks like they've started to lose pops here. Yeah, they're losing power from the Missouri Compromise ticking down as well. So you do need to make sure, no matter where you are, when you're addressing a powerful landowner, that you understand where their political strength is coming from. Because I forgot that they had this Missouri Compromise ticking down, so I can't really watch the influence of political strength from votes changing here, because it's going to be hard to hold their wealth and power still. But you should know that democracy is going to make your landowners weaker on average. The exception, if you aren't careful, is landed voting, but that's just because they get political strength from aristocrats' votes. So just focus on getting capitalists and clergymen and officers in there, and then landed voting will work for you. Okay, well, that's a basic way on how to. Oh, and of course, if you can get into a more advanced taxation system, that'll also help. But by the time you're working on that, hopefully the landowner isn't even in your government anymore, because you've already like removed them and been suppressing them for a while. All right, well, that's Walker. That's Landowners. I know that some of that was a little pulling from 6 different videos that you've already seen, but I think that having a how-to on combating a landowner, I think, is a valuable lesson for everybody, because it can apply to any IG, really, that you can apply the same sort of heuristics to determine, like, all right, I have a very powerful industrialists, how do I reduce their power? Well, you figure out where their power is coming from. That's step one. That's the most important thing. Don't ever make assumptions there. Okay, that's Walker. Take care.